It has to be in the title of my book. Hello, everybody. Welcome to In This Corner, the podcast. We're at $168. We're super middleweights today, and I don't know where they're going to be in a few weeks when they get into that ring. I guess Canelo and Bud are supposed to be super middleweights, I would assume. We'll see. Anyway, boxing's biggest names, boxing's biggest stories, boxing's biggest fights, greatest memories, and moments. We cover it all with flash, panache, and Lee Groves from Friendly, West Virginia, the author, writer, historian, CompuBox counter, and great guy. How you doing, Lee? And we got a lot to cover, man. The excitement is starting to get not yet palpable, but heading towards it for what's going to take place just in a couple of weeks here in Vegas. Of course, Crawford and Canelo.
Yeah, very much looking forward to that fight. We were just discussing some of the aspects of that fight before we started recording here, and you said make it simple. Who's the better fighter and who's the bigger fighter, and then how's that going to mix? So, but we'll get to that we'll get to that bridge when we get there.
And in keeping with the theme of the show, we're not much to review or preview in the way of fights.
Right.
But we've got some topics, and boy, do we have a great guest.
We do have a great guest, and that is Hall of Fame broadcaster Al Bernstein, which kind of flows into last week's show because he recently did a broadcast with Eric Botcher for Christy Martin's show. So we're going to have the Hall of Fame broadcaster on there, and you've worked with him before. So what are your general thoughts on Mr. Bernstein?
I tell you what I'll do. I've worked with Al many fights. I tell you what I'll do. I'll tell you what I think of him when we bring him on. But let's get to you've worked hard to put together this pugilistic puzzle we do pretty much every week on the show. So what do we got? Fire away, baby.
All right, so we got three topics. And the first one, last week it was revealed that Saul Canelo Alvarez has been sparring with Jaron Ennis in preparation for the big fight against Bud. The pro-Canelo crowd seems very pleased with this choice, while some in the pro-Bud contingent are almost begging Boots to be a spy and to go back and tell Bud everything that they've been doing, what's his plan, everything like that. First of all, do you think that Ennis is a good choice of sparring partner? And second, what are your thoughts of the social media storm that always seems to be raging?
I'm an outlier when it comes to the social media storm. I think most of the people, especially the ones that have the most hits or likes, suck. They don't know a damn thing about boxing. But just to answer your question, Ennis is a great choice, I think. He's an excellent boxer. He's quick of hand. He looks to be, I think, a little bit bigger than Bud. Nat, he's a little bit larger. Yeah. When you're having a big fight, certainly you get people in there that replicate somewhat the guy you're fighting, but you also just want decent sparring, somebody that's going to make you think, somebody that's going to make you use responsible defense, which Crawford better use, and somebody that, is not easy to hit, because Canelo isn't easy to hit. He never has been. He's got that Mexican head roll and the good shoulder movement, slow of foot, but we'll get into that as we get closer to the fight. I think it's an excellent choice.
And I think one other aspect that makes Jaron Ennis an excellent choice is he switch hits very, very well, just like Crawford does. He's the closest thing to Crawford when it comes to fluid switch hitting. He's not quite on Crawford's level, but he's on a very good level in that respect.
Yeah, I think overall, Canelo having that type of sparring is a good thing. And I'm sure Crawford's getting some of the same great sparring. They're both doing it. Yeah. But again, for Canelo to have Boots, I think is really a good thing, because he fights a lot like Bud does in spurts. A little different. I'm trying to picture him in my head, but I think that's excellent sparring for Canelo.
Yep. And the second topic, and this is a subject that we have addressed more than a few times over the past year or so, and that's the two worlds that boxing occupies right now. And the best way to describe it is big time versus big top. And in that respect, there are two fights, one in each camp, that will take place 6 days apart. The first one is the big time fight, Vergil Ortiz versus Erickson Lubin, which is scheduled to take place November 8th in Fort Worth for Ortiz's secondary WBC 154-pound title. And then 6 days later, we have Jake Paul fighting reigning 135-pound champion Gervonta Davis. It's going to take place in Atlanta in a bout that is listed by BoxRec as a hybrid professional match. So, what do you make of the two worlds, and what do you make of the two fights?
One world is reality, and the other world is what has become of society. Whatever happens in society permeates into sports, which is actually unreality that is called reality television these days. Anytime you see something that says reality TV, it's unrealistic for the most part.
Mhm.
It's beyond absurd. It's beyond bizarre. It's beyond asinine, and it's beyond stupid. I can understand Gervonta Davis's motivation to make all that money in a fight that it's not even a real fight. I don't know what Jake Paul, well, I guess I do know what he's trying to do. He's just trying to capitalize. He has used boxing as his vehicle to promote himself and to promote his social media and to promote himself as some kind of a fighter, which is completely, bizarre to me. I always said from the get-go that it was going to be a very negative, it would have very deleterious effects on boxing. I think it has. And what's so sad now is, again, much of what is going on in society, especially here in America, is going on in boxing. It's created an unrealistic atmosphere for kids going into the sport now, for youngsters going into prize fighting. What is prize fighting? Do you become a YouTuber first? Oh, or do you become an amateur fighter? Do you fight people in your weight class? Or do you fight somebody 70 pounds lighter? Do you fight guys on a legitimate level as you? Or also, do you dig up corpses and fight dead bodies? I can't figure it out. It's the little guy right there who wasn't much of a great fighter, that's for sure. Just a little club fighter, and I didn't even do it the right way. And I found out the hard way that if you don't do it the right way, amateur career, go into professional and see how you do. You're not going to probably be successful. And then it gets into how do you define success? Everything about it, Lee, is absurd. You and I talk about it all the time with disappointment. There was anger, there's disappointment, and now I'm just sad for what it's all become, and in trying to figure out how you undo it, or can you undo it. So all I can say is my focus would be on a Vergil Ortiz and a Lubin. My focus will be on a Canelo and a Crawford. Not only good fighters, in that case, great fighters. And so that's going to be mine. The rest of the boxing, the so-called boxing world, Roger Mayweather, if you're up there, I know you're listening and smiling. The rest of it, they can all have that. So that's what I think of it.
I think the same way. We've been talking about this for the last couple of years, and I always had a glimmer of hope that this was just a phase that would pass, just like the other phases that we have experienced over the past 25 or 30 years. This seems to be the jump the shark moment. And if you don't know what jumping the shark means, look up the term and the show Happy Days, in which Arthur Fonzarelli, the Fonz, jumps the shark. It has become a shorthand phrase for you've gone beyond the pale and there's no coming back. And as far as this sideshow world that we're talking about, the big top, I think it's jumped the shark. It is here to stay. And as I wrote on a post on X, my passion is going to be invested in the real fights like Vergil Ortiz and Erickson Lubin. That's a very intriguing fight. It really is. Vergil Ortiz is a knockout artist. He's up and coming. He's undefeated. He has gone through a few tests. Lubin is experienced, a good all-around fighter. Technically, he can punch, he can box, he has experience. He lost to Fundura, but
Lee,
he
you don't have
carried
to do
himself
that.
well.
That fight. Wait till we get to that fight before
Yeah,
you break it down, because you're the one of the best in the world at it. But there's so many wonderful fights out there that
there
happen.
are.
You're the one who I have coming on here talking about them all. But anyway, what's our next time? Get before my blood pressure rises.
Right. Well, I don't know if this is going to help, but finally, a comeback that we thought that we would never ever see took place last weekend in Lagos, Nigeria, as 52-year-old Ike Ibeabuchi scored a third round corner retirement victory over 40-year-old Idris Afeni, his first ring appearance since 1999 when he stopped Chris Bird in 5 rounds. After the fight, Ibeabuchi demanded a fight with undisputed heavyweight champion Alexander Usyk, saying that he's now 21-0 with 16 knockouts, and he deserves the shot. And if that fight doesn't happen, he wants Tyson Fury. Now, you told me you saw clips of the fight. What do you think of all this?
Like you say, it's you segued from one to the other. It's ludicrous. I understand, but he's all Ibeabuchi. He was a hell of a fighter. I think he would have become heavyweight champion of the world. But I knew people back then who know him with the Cedric Kushner team. The guy's crazy. He's insane. He's I watched. It sums it up with what I watched last night before I went to bed. I was flipping through the movie. One flew over the cuckoo's nest. Perfect. Ibeabuchi is two flews over the cuckoo's nest. Was a hell of a fighter, a crazy, troubled man, a bad guy. There was a reason. I mean, and he was kept out. Cedric and them saved him many times. Cedric Kushner and them saved him many times. But all I can hope is that prison rehabilitated him, and he needs to think of something else to do. If he's got his screws back together, his loose screws, I think he should work on something other than getting hit in the head, which will loosen those screws once again. He only has himself to blame. I could see him going around and being a speaker and talking about how, hey, I had it all right here and I blew it. That would be my advice to Ike Ibeabuchi, because a little fight like that he had the other day where he looked ponderously slow, still has power in the physique, but you know how this ends, and we all know how it ends.
It ends pretty badly, but I think we're in a place now that we need to have our spirits lifted a little bit, and I think the next segment will help in that process.
With the great Al Bernstein.
That's right.
Coming up.
I got two options. Option one, I can accept defeat. Option two, I can get up. I can get tougher. I can get faster. I can get stronger. And then I go get mine. I made my choice. Have you made yours?
Back in this corner of the podcast, boxing's biggest names, boxing's biggest stories, boxing's biggest fights, greatest memories and moments. Special guest time, and he is very special when it comes to boxing and broadcasting and other things. Lee, you asked me right before the break there to describe Al as a broadcaster, because I'm pretty opinionated about broadcasters. But Al checks all the boxes. I always well prepared, extremely knowledgeable, fair, always brings in a historical perspective to educate boxing fans. A great team player. So many guys and gals that are on the air, they're self-centered and working on themselves, but Al always tries to make the people around him shine, and that's something not everybody does. Not over the top. One of my biggest complaints, especially where boxing is headed now, maybe all of sport, maybe all of society, he's not over the top, which makes him an extremely easy listen. And that's why he is an International Boxing Hall of Famer, a Florida Boxing Hall of Famer, a Nevada Boxing Hall of Famer, probably a friendly West Virginia Hall of Famer.
If we had one.
Yeah. Al Bernstein joins us. How you doing, Al?
Thank you. That was very kind, and I appreciate the way you framed that. That was very nice, and I hope, when I sit down to broadcast, I try to live up to all those things you talked about. I believe you kind of touched on all the things that we hope are important when we broadcast, though, as you point out, that is not always the case on sports broadcasting. But all we can do as broadcasters is do our part by trying to do it when we work.
Yeah. I've noticed you making some comments on Twitter, X, whatever we call it, where you're giving positive information and advice to broadcasters, sometimes without giving names. I was lucky enough to work with a few people. And you know what I found in helping other young broadcasters, I also found that it helped me, myself, in giving them some advice and tutoring them. I would say, am I following all that? Because you tend to forget when you get caught up into all of this, which leads us, I won't make you do too much of it, but I've always enjoyed when you tell your story of how you got into pugilism, and you told it for the audience with me at the International Boxing Hall of Fame. Maybe you can do your Reader's Digest version, but for folks who don't know the embryonic incipient stages of Al Bernstein, tell us how you got into this.
Well, I started being involved. I boxed as a youngster, like a lot of people did, but I was kind of headed in different directions, and when I was a newspaper man in Chicago, I was in hard news, and I got a chance to write for Ring Magazine to cover sports and cover fights, and Boxing Illustrated then. And then when ESPN came to town, to Chicago, they were one of the 4 stops that they were doing on the Top Rank Boxing Series, which was in its embryonic stages, as was ESPN. Well, I kind of wiggled my way in with them just for free, saying, hey, I'll help you I knew the local boxers in Chicago, I'll help you, know about the fighters and things. And it was free. So they said, okay. Well, I did that. Then one night they interviewed me on the show about my book, at a book out, Boxing for Beginners. And so they interviewed me. And then one night, Tommy Hearns was on the show commentating, and it wasn't going as well as they would have liked. So they wanted someone to jump in and help a little bit. And I was there, and they said, could you jump into the broadcast? I said, sure. I did. They liked what they heard. And they didn't really have a regular rotation of announcers, and then they settled on Randy Gordon doing the East Coast fights, and I would do everything west of the Mississippi. So I kind of finagled my way on, got a lucky opportunity when they asked me to do it. And I can even remember the name of the first 2 fighters. It was Jamie Olatunde and David Bradley in the main event. I don't know why I remember that.
You always remember your first.
Coming full circle, and it just makes me think, before I flip it to Lee, who's prepared some wonderful questions for you. With ESPN now seemingly going out of the business, getting out of the business, you've been doing your own thing for many, many years with Showtime and what have you, but how does it make you feel? Lee and I were just talking about Bill Rasmussen, who used to come down and do my radio show in Florida, the original founder of ESPN, and you were there in the beginning, and you did so much with them, the big fight series, all the fights. How does it make you feel now with them segueing out of the business, and do you think it's permanent?
I don't know if it's permanent. ESPN, I have to say, has always had a love-hate relationship with boxing, in my opinion. And I think if there's one person that, well, there are probably several people that could comment on it with some information, but I think I'm one of them. They they wanted to have it, but they didn't want to have it, and they liked it, but they didn't like it. And so I think it's been a strange journey for boxing on the network. And I think now, since they're moving away from the live boxing, the sad part is I have a feeling it's, as it always does at ESPN, it will also influence how much the sport in general is covered. It was always hard, even when I was there all those years, to get them to do anything on SportsCenter about boxing, to cover the sport, to really do things, even with them having the series and everything. And I think that'll be even more difficult now. I mean, I don't know if I feel nostalgia about it, but from the standpoint of the sport of boxing, of course, it's not great, because in America, it takes away that one last vestige of network presence.
Chatting with Hall of Fame broadcaster Al Bernstein as I flip it to Lee Groves.
Hey, Lee, how are you?
Doing well. Thanks for asking. You mentioned earlier that your roots was in writing, and then you transitioned to broadcasting. So describe the transition process from writing to broadcasting. Those are two different skill sets. And who were the people that helped you with that process?
Yeah, that's a good question. I knew that when I got started doing the broadcasting, I felt like, well, here's the thing. I was a complete unknown. I wasn't a famous person in boxing. I was covering boxing, but I was not a trainer, not a fighter. I had boxed, but that only, informed me. It wasn't anything to hang my hat on. So I had to do two things. I had to bring information to the audience, because why would they trust me that as just a pure analyst of the sport? There's no reason for them to trust me. So I had to bring information, which my writing background helped me do, and then parenthetically also analyze the fight well. Now, I was lucky enough that I was able to analyze the fight well enough to gain acceptance. But I had to bring information at the beginning. And so the point you're making about making the transition, it was helpful to me that I had a background in print, because it's all about getting a story, highlighting the who, what, where, why, find out more, additive information about it. And that was very helpful to me. I did have mentors, but not right at the beginning. I did end up with a couple of people being very instrumental in helping me. Gil Clancy was one. He was, of course, a great analyst, but he did it from a purely instinctive, he wasn't a broadcaster, hadn't been, but he was very good. His broadcasting technique was good. But he was helpful in a lot of ways still. And then in 1985, I met Don Dunphy, who came on the show, and he was such a nice man. And of course, then I would work with his son, Bob Dunphy, at Showtime as a director for 20 years. And Don was very helpful in terms of the announcing part and suggesting things and being, and then the rest of it, to be honest, I took it from people I either worked with or saw. I watched and listened very carefully to everybody that did boxing and thought, what parts of it can I utilize without copying them?
Mm-hmm. Well, it's not surprising that you mentioned Gil Clancy as being one who taught you, because he was a teacher before he became a trainer and a broadcaster.
Correct. A teacher in high school too, right?
Very much so. Yes.
Yeah.
So he knew how to teach. He taught boxers how to fight,
Yeah.
strategize, and everything. So it made perfect sense as far as Gil Clancy is concerned. Of course, Don Dunphy is Don Dunphy. He is
Yeah.
an icon.
And Gil
Um,
wasn't, I'm sorry to interrupt you, Lee, but I
all
just
right.
want to add this and then you can go right back to your train of thought. Gil was not afraid to tell you things you might not want to hear. He's that kind of guy, but in a good way, but still no nonsense. He would tell you if he thought, there was something you needed to clean up.
Everybody has strengths and weaknesses. And of course, you discussed one of your strengths, which was your background in print, as far as research is concerned and all that. What did you have to work on most during the early years?
Early on, I had to I had to figure out there weren't many people doing it that were like me. In fact, almost none. There were trainers like Angelo Dundee and Gil Clancy. There were boxers. But if we look back, in a way, I was the first person, other than Larry Merchant. Larry Merchant was there, but I'm not even sure. I may have predated Larry Merchant because I don't. When did he start? In the early '80s or late '70s?
I remember seeing him in the late '70s. I think he was on NBC.
All right, so let me say this. He was doing it, okay? So there was only maybe two people. So you had to create your own template. And that part was kind of hard because how much do you do informationally? How much do you do in terms of analyzing? And you don't want to take away from the play-by-play guy in terms of information. But it's funny though. Some play-by-play people do a lot of information, and some don't. And so you learn as you work with them that you can put in more of your anecdotal information, which you want to do some of at least. But sometimes if a play-by-play guy isn't into doing that all the time, it's required of you to make the broadcast better.
Mm-hmm. You've been part of many historic broadcasts, but one that stands out is Hagler Hearns and that unforgettable first round, arguably the best opening 3 minutes ever. Yeah. First, did you expect them to do what they did? And second, do you recall what you were thinking as you saw this violence unfold before you?
Yeah, I don't think anybody could tell you that they expected that in the first round. We certainly thought it was going to be an action-filled fight. But to get that in the very first round, and it all started because Tommy Hearns landed that big right hand, right? That ignited the I was thinking that Billy Joel's song, "We Didn't Start the Fire," and there's all these lyrics about igniting fires. That's what that did. It ignited the fight. And I think it made Marvin Hagler realize, wow, this guy can crack. I have got to meet fire with fire. And he didn't know at the time that Hearns injured his right hand with that right hand, right? He didn't know it right away. And I always wonder, it's one of those questions in boxing. What if Tommy Hearns did not hurt his right hand with that first punch? I'm not saying Marvin Hagler won because of that, because it was a great performance by Hagler, but no, we were not expecting that. And so here's another little thing I'll say. Leading up to the Hagler Hearns, the undercard hadn't been, it wasn't terrible or anything, but it hadn't been filled with a lot of action, as I recall. And Al Michaels was doing the fights with me, and Al didn't do that much boxing. And in fact, that was supposed to be kind of an audition, by the way. From ABC. They asked Bob Arum to put Al Michaels on the show to pair him with me because they were seeing if we were going to be their team at ABC. And so he didn't do that much boxing. Well, the undercard was not wildly exciting, and Al has kind of a laid back broadcasting style anyway. So it was a very more sedate broadcast. And then, of course, we got that first round. And now, Al was like, "Uh-oh, we got," and then we, of course, we took it from there. Now, I will say, and I've said this a couple of times, every time I say it, I almost feel guilty about saying it. I didn't really like my call of that round.
Why so? Why?
Never. I don't think I was informational enough. I was too excited. I probably said some things that were valuable. And the irony is I am in the minority here because I mostly get positive feedback from it. But I wasn't, from the second round on, I was happy with what I did in the fight. In the first round, not so much.
Well, you know what? Those two fighters, if you did have some ebbs and flows, believe me, the fighters in that first round made up for it.
Smitty, that's a good point.
Yeah, makes me think of one of the first interviews I ever did, a little $39 recorder that I took down to Miami and stuck it in the face of Tommy Hearns, and I asked him how he was going to fight that fight, and I thought he was just being over the top. He says, "I'm going to go right out there and get him," and I was shocked that he said that, and lo and behold, that's what he did.
Yeah, that's interesting that you have that. You can focus in on that moment and remember him saying it. And you're right. At the time, probably when you're doing an interview, you think, well, okay, he's saying that, but he's probably not going to do exactly that. And then, that was exactly what it was. And it ignited what was arguably one of the great first rounds in any weight division, and certainly in middleweight history. And the only good thing I did during that round was I did say that right at the end of the first round. So maybe I redeemed the call with that comment right at the end.
There you go. And of course, a fight that was great all the way through was the first meeting between Diego Corrales and Jose Luis Castillo. Fight many say is the single greatest fight they've ever seen. Was that the greatest fight you've ever seen?
Certainly the greatest I ever announced. And it was Hagler Hearns times 3, so you can say that with a straight face. It was a staggering fight, and I think you guys. I'm curious to what you guys have to say. Also, I'd love your opinion. But the reason, in my opinion, the reason you could elevate it above some other fights, like for instance, let's take an example: the Gatti Ward trilogy. Wildly exciting, thrilling to watch, just so many layers of fun. This fight was fought on a higher skill level, which is not to denigrate Gatti and Ward, but this fight was fought on a higher skill level. And there were so many surprises in this fight. We didn't expect Corrales to stand in the pocket with Jose Luis Castillo. Nobody expected that. He had shown in a couple fights leading up to that, become more of a boxer puncher, right? And used his height a little bit more and done the things that it seemed, he had to do that against Jose Luis Castillo, because if he stood in the pocket with Castillo, it would be a problem. Well, and I remember during the first rounds saying, okay, this is the strategy that most people wouldn't anticipate. He's making it work to this point, will that continue, that kind of stuff. But it was an astonishingly good fight. You could certainly make the case for it being the best one that you've seen. I mean, there are so many, right? But as far as announced, I never announced a fight as good as that. And part of it was you made the point. It was good from start to finish, and it had a dramatic turn at the end. 2 dramatic turns, right?
Yes, it did.
Yes, so that was pretty extraordinary.
And actually, I also work with CompuBox, and we actually did a retro count of that fight.
Oh.
And it turns out that Jose Luis Castillo landed 400 total punches. Diego Corrales landed 395.
Wow. Boy, does that tell you everything you need to know about that fight.
It does.
Yeah, and I can say this from getting to know him, lucky enough to have him on the television show and did an in-ring with him. Diego was never the same after that fight, by the way, in my opinion.
No. Yeah, I don't think so. I think it was, and maybe neither was Castillo, right?
Right.
Probably, I guess if we look back, that was just too much of a toll that it took out of those two fighters. And you're right. I think they suffered from that. They weren't super old when they fought each other. Castillo was a little older, if I recall. Am I correct about that? I think so. Maybe a year or two older. But they weren't like in their mid 30s or something, and yet their careers after that were a struggle, more of struggles. And how could that not take something out of you as an athlete and a fighter?
Hagler, Hearns, Castillo, Corrales, Al Bernstein. We'll take a break and come back with more. Back in this corner of the podcast and chatting with about as good as it gets in boxing and broadcasting. He's Al Bernstein. Lee, pick it up. You got some more, I know.
I do. In the previous segment, we've acknowledged that you've worked with a lot of different people throughout your career. So because of that, I'd like to play a game of name association. Mm-hmm. I'll bring up a name to you, and you give me some thumbnail thoughts about what just pops into your mind. First name. Sal Marciano.
First broadcaster I truly worked with for a series of fights, was so gracious to me. He was a big star in New York on TV. That's why when ESPN was in its embryonic stages, he got the job. He could have been lofty with me. He wasn't. He was a delightful guy. We had more fun than we should have been allowed to have, and maybe than we were allowed to have for the year and a half that he was on the ESPN boxing series. And he was a very electric broadcaster.
Barry Tompkins.
The yin to my yang. We did 8 years together, and we always joked that we could finish each other's thoughts. Barry, it was a seamless partnership, and everything about what he does as a broadcaster and what I do as a broadcaster fits in that, in terms of sitting at ringside and doing boxing.
Dave Bontempo.
Wonderful, wonderful broadcaster who did analysis with me. I did play-by-play with Dave for a long time. And then he switched over to play-by-play, and for many years did it in fights where he'd do it alone and with other people. And he did a very good job on play-by-play as well. Dave Bontempo is one of the nicest, most genuine human beings that anybody will ever meet, and was a very fine boxing writer as well, as you know, Lee, and knows the sport inside and out.
Yeah, we had him on our podcast recently. Yeah. He was everything that you just said that he was.
Yeah, he's the greatest.
Yep.
And by the way, I believe by the time we were done with our part of broadcasting, we used to do it at the Resorts International, a lot of the fights in the early 80s, and they had a hockey game. Remember those hockey games that you played? They had one at the down in the whatever, one of the entertainment things for the kids. And we played that incessantly.
Really?
And I believe to this day, you talked about the punch numbers being close with Corrales Castillo. I believe we played well over 1,000 games, and I think the count is probably 499 to 499 or something like that. We're pretty close.
Very, very close. Mauro Ranallo.
Mauro is one of the most proficient broadcasters at providing information, and he has a very energetic style that I think is. I enjoyed working with Mauro. But when you work with different people, different things are required. Morrow needs more space than Barry Tompkins. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to work with that. And you have to understand it. Morrow would always say to me that, he does a lot of shtick during broadcasts, and I would react to it. And he said, not everybody reacts, but I think Morrow, from the standpoint of knowing what information to give boxing fans, I think he did a very good job of that.
Corey Erdman.
Corey, the future voice of boxing. Seriously.
Mm-hmm.
I'm lucky enough now to work with Corey on the big time boxing series on DAZN that Salida Promotions puts on. He and Raul Marquez. It's a wonderful broadcast booth to work in. And I think Corey Erdman is as talented as any play-by-play announcer I have ever worked with. And that's saying something, because I have worked with the best.
And speaking of among the best, James Smitty Smith.
Smitty, we had so much fun doing boxing together. And I'm going to tell you something, Smitty is one of those guys. He's like, he's a real flamboyant, right? You're the suits, that many drapes had to die for him to wear, right?
Oh my gosh.
There were drapes all over America that had to die so you could have suits. So ecologically, I'm not sure, Smitty, but you know what? Here's the dead on truth about Smitty as a broadcaster when he's doing boxing. Very disciplined, very informed, and for people that see him and always, because he's got a vibrant personality and everything, they might think not somebody that's going to color between the lines correctly, and he does. 100%. And it was always a joy. We had a lot of fun doing the fights we did. I think. I hope Smitty did. And we
we can't talk about, unfortunately.
Pardon?
Some we can't talk about, unfortunately.
Yeah, some we can't talk about, but it was we really did enjoy the process. Yeah. It was very enjoyable. I really liked it. And in that instance, it's funny, when you talk about different partners, I did play-by-play, I think, when we were together.
Yes.
And so that, as I did with Dave, and that colors your partnership, obviously. But I like that. See, I love doing play-by-play with a good analyst, because you talk about different things in broadcasting. Both you guys were talking about things you have to fight to make sure you do. Like Smitty was talking about talking to young people and reminding yourself what you need to do. When you do play-by-play, and lately I've been doing more play-by-play again now, you have to remind yourself, since you also have been an analyst, do not usurp the territory for the analyst. Of course, you're going to have a little more insight maybe than somebody that's doing play-by-play that hasn't done a lot of boxing or something, but don't usurp the territory. Stick to your lane, for the most part. And so, yeah, we had a lot of fun.
Which brings me to,
could I mention one other guy so that we don't forget him? Steve Albert.
Oh gosh, yes.
And I'll tell you what, I just was watching, we were talking about Castillo Corrales, and I was watching the call of that fight. And I've always said that it's one of the shows I'm proudest of, but a lot of that goes to Steve Albert. He was brilliant in calling that fight. And Steve was a fantastic play-by-play. And you talk about preparation. Smitty was talking about it. There was never anybody more prepared than him to do a boxing broadcast.
And he's going to be on the show shortly. I also want to mention a guy I worked with. Steve Farhood was also.
Steve's fantastic. Yeah, he's Steve's amazing, and of analysts that that doing play-by-play, Dave, Steve, Rich Murata, some of the people that I know were fulfill that role, and then I get a chance to work with them as play-by-play. If I didn't do play-by-play, I'd never get a chance to work with some of you guys. But Steve's a great man.
Which leads us to, without mentioning names, I'm just not happy with the way what I see and what I hear in broadcasting now. For example, the Canelo Crawford fight coming up. I think you have 65 announcers that'll be part of the broadcast.
There, yeah.
I'm of a school. I think I've spoken to you about this, but I come from the stage where there was a blow by blow, a color, and maybe a roving reporter.
Right.
What are your thoughts on the way it's being done now? I think it's too much, but what do you
I
think?
agree. Yeah, I agree 100%. There are a couple of areas here. One, and I've worked in many three-man booths. I'm in one now, and I'm not, and many of them have worked out fine. But at the end of the day, I'll go to my grave saying this: two-man booths are better than three-man booths in every single sport. Two voices are quite enough, and that's number one. Number two, this layering of broadcasters, on the bigger the show, the more people you have to have. You can make you got the analyst, the play-by-play. Let's say even if you have a three-man booth. Yes, you might want a host up there. You might want a roving reporter, though in my opinion, if you got three analysts, guess what? One of the guys that's at the booth, at the thing, I mean, that's what I do now in the Sleeta promotions. I run up and do the interviews. When I did the ESPN Top Rank Boxing show for 20 some years, it was two people, period. And I ran up and did the interviews. And Smitty's been on those kind of broadcasts many times. Okay. But you can make a case for 4, maybe 5, because you could have somebody else sitting up there with the host. And then let's say we have a 3-man booth and one person, 5 or 6. Beyond that, it's just all overkill. It doesn't make sense to me. I really don't know what that is.
Lee, how many do they have for Canelo Crawford?
At least 12, maybe 13.
That's more than the Super Bowl uses.
Yeah.
God.
It's a lot.
No, you got a couple of more questions. Sorry to interrupt you.
Yeah, it's okay. It's just a lot. And but it's in keeping, unfortunately, with the tenor of what's going on.
Yeah.
Shifting toward more current events, one fighter who has made a lot of noise in the heavyweight divisions is Moses Itauma, who at age 20 is sparking memories of the Mike Tyson that tore up the heavyweight division 40 years ago.
Yeah.
What do you make of his success, and do you think, as some say, is he ready for Usyk?
Well, I think he's a terrific fighter, really terrific. We all know that when you're judging heavyweights, we've all covered heavyweights where about 13 fights in or 10 fights in, we say, wow, this guy's special. And then something happens and they're not special anymore. I don't think that's going to happen to him. But I look at the whole question of Usyk differently. It's not even a question of whether he's ready. Should he jump the line of the Parkers and the other Caballel, who I think are much more deserving of fights with Usyk right now. He's had 13 fights. Is it 13, I think, or something like that. And he's fought no one in the top 15 yet. Mm-hmm. His best win was, Dillian White, who is an aging fighter. And why would this 20-year-old get a shot at Usyk right now when there are at least two or three other, contenders that are perfect? Now, that is in no way denigrating him. He's fighting all the right people that he should be fighting, and he's super talented. But, and I think it would end up maybe being a super disservice to him. Now, maybe he'd win, and that would be astonishing. And I guess that would completely reverse whatever I'm saying about this, but there's no law that that's going to happen.
Speaking of a possible reason why Itauma might jump the line, and that man is Turki Al-Sheikh. What do you make of his rise in the sport?
Well, here, for better or worse, and you can look at this from 82 different angles, because he's in a position of authority and has so much money to spend, his opinion ends up being a pretty important one, because at the end of the day, if he wants to put the full weight of his promotional resources behind something, and he gets it in his head that, boy, this would be great, and this would be great for boxing, he can make it happen. So, you know, at the end of the day, I guess that could be the tipping point, or would tip the balance toward the idea of having that fight. And it's a risk. It's a risk for Itauma. And you know, maybe one he's worth taking at this juncture. I don't know. And does Usyk want to fight him? I mean, Usyk is certainly not someone that runs away from challenges. God knows that's not the case. I mean, what he's done is historical. He wiped out a very talented cruiserweight division, a really talented cruiserweight division, fighting every one of them just about on the road.
Yes.
He jumped up and fought behemoths in the heavyweight division and beat them all. And then, you know, has been willing to fight virtually everybody. So he's certainly not avoiding anybody, but maybe, you know, maybe he wants somebody else to, you know, we always talk about fighters that have earned the right to kind of choose their path a little bit. I'd say if there's anybody that has that right, you know, we criticize Canelo in many cases for what his situation of really picking and choosing. Hey, Usyk has barely picked and chosen anything. He's just faced the toughest guys there.
You know, you've called so many of the great heavyweight champions, and I was blessed enough to be right there with Ali a lot as a little kid and watching him, and covered so many greats myself. And Usyk's really grown on me. I'm not saying he's the best ever. But I'll tell you this: there's not, including I love Muhammad Ali. I don't think there's anybody that's ever been inside a boxing ring, any weight division, even heavyweight, that would have blown away Usyk, and he would be competitive with anybody in history, in my opinion.
Yeah, definitely would be competitive with anyone. Sure. Why not? Why wouldn't he be? Would he win every fight? Who knows? But
right.
But why wouldn't he be competitive? Because he's so talented.
Yeah.
He's so clever. And he has shown that size isn't the determining factor in beating him. So we can take all the big heavyweights. Like a perfect example is, very tough fight for him, Lennox Lewis.
Yeah.
But would he be competitive against Lennox Lewis? I say yes.
Yeah.
I agree with you. And certainly the smaller heavyweights, and wouldn't we all love to see a prime Evander Holyfield and him as cruiserweights? That would be more fun even than heavyweights. I mean, that kind of stuff. Or can you imagine him against Joe Frazier, you know, or Ali even? So yeah, no, and here's the thing. I think people get, you know, we now live in an age where it's, you know, between the pound for pounds and constantly comparing who's the greatest of this, and if I see one more Mount Rushmore on social media, I'm probably going to commit suicide, you know, so I have to avert my eyes when they come up. But, you know, it doesn't matter. The statement you made is one that makes sense to me, because it's like, let's think back on him with all these people, and how would that be, and what, you know, it's great to think about, and would he be competitive? Yes. And so like when people are obsessed with, is he the greatest heavyweight of all time? I don't know if he's the greatest heavyweight. Is he the greatest cruiserweight? I'm not sure, but I know this much: he's one of the great fighters of all time. You can't argue that, right? And that's really where it is.
And speaking of, sometimes mythical matchups become reality. I guess we're going to see one in a couple of weeks here in Las Vegas. Crawford, who I've had pound for pound number one for about 8 years. Canelo, I've done so many interviews with. You've done both of their fights. And I'll simply say, how do you see it? What do you think's going to happen, Al?
Yeah. You know, I was just yesterday, I went into a 7-Eleven to get gas, or a terrible herb or something, to get gas. And there was a guy in there who was working there. He's a boxing fan. And he came up to me. He's talking to me. He's asking me questions. And he asked me that. And I said, you know, I'm really not sure. And he said, but you're the expert. You're supposed to know. I said, yeah, but, you know, I don't know if I have a strong opinion. This is one of those fights that, in my opinion, I understand people having a strong opinion either way. I could see it. I just don't. I don't know. The going up in weight is an issue, obviously, for Crawford, and he has already come up, to get to 154. You could look at the Madrimov fight and say it wasn't a dominant performance. He won a close fight. So was he great when he moved up to 154? Was it the kind of dominant thing where you said, man, this guy's seamlessly moving up in weight? Not really, but he's super talented. He knows how to win. He doesn't lose. He always figures out ways to win fights. And he's got great talent. So, and then you look at Canelo, who is certainly in the twilight of his career, but so is Crawford, right? Crawford's older even than him. Although I think there's probably more miles on the speedometer for Canelo because he started early and he's had many more fights. But you look at all the factors, and you can make a case for Bud Crawford boxing superbly. He is not going to knock out Canelo. I don't think that's going to happen. And he might not hurt him, but what can happen is what happened with Bivol and Canelo, and that is Canelo getting a little tired, Bivol putting his punches together and pushing Canelo back. One thing for Bud Crawford, he is not a volume puncher, neither is Canelo. But here's the other thing. To win rounds against Canelo, who, let's face it, beating him on the scorecards is not an easy task for people.
Ask Gennady Golovkin.
Yeah, let's put it that way. So you're going to have to do enough to win rounds.
Yep.
Before we, Lee, you got one more quick one?
Just one. You're 45 years into this broadcasting career, and you've already been inducted into several halls of fame. Are there still goals to be had? And if so, what are they?
That's a good question. That's a really good question. I think what I want to do now is I'm still enjoying doing it, and that's why I do it. I love doing it. I really enjoy the process. It's funny how I mentioned lately I've been doing a little more play-by-play, and I enjoy that. That's like just putting my brain in a different place. If I had to say something, this is a weird thing to say because I hope it doesn't come off wrong. One thing that and it's because of the nature of the sport, I wish, you mentioned that been in a lot of Hall of Fames, and that's wonderful. I appreciate it. None of us ever expect to be in anybody's Hall of Fame, and you appreciate it. The sport of boxing, and this isn't just about me, so I hope it doesn't come off like I'm personalizing this. Boxing broadcasters don't get enough attention from the people that make decisions about other sportscasting things, whether it's awards or getting attention from other sports entities or sportscasting entities. They don't pay attention to boxing announcers. And I wish that was the case more. I don't know how I can put that properly, but that would be the one thing that if you just ask me, what's the one little goal or little, thing that you wish you could get past, it would just be somehow, and not just for me, for other boxing broadcasters, for these sports entities that exist, to acknowledge more of what broadcasters have done in boxing.
Yeah, well, and nobody has done it any better than you. So that is certainly something to be proud of. And I know you're still performing. You're not only, he can perform on horseback, and I think you've got a date coming up at the Tuscany, right? You're still doing.
Thank you for mentioning it.
Tell us about that.
And I hope maybe you guys can come out if you're around. I am going to be doing my music show. It's been a tradition since 1987. I did 3 nights doing my music show at the Olympic Lounge at Caesar's Palace, leading up to the Hagler-Leonard fight. And that began, number one, a journey for me in performing, even though I'd done a little bit of it in Chicago, but that really kind of set me on a course. And I've made it a practice in whenever possible, when a big fight's coming to Las Vegas, to do some kind of entertainment show, kicking off the weekend. And I've done it for a lot of, at the Mandalay Bay and the Westgate, and then it was the Hilton and the Riviera and Caesars and Mandalay Bay and a bunch of them. And in the last 3 or 4 years, I've been at the Tuscany Casino, where I kind of found a home for music, doing shows throughout the year. And so on September 11th, we'll be doing a show there in which we'll do music and we'll do some boxing trivia and give some prizes away. And it should be a fun night. Shows at 8:00 and 9:30. There is no cover charge, so just come out, have a cocktail or two if you'd like, and enjoy the music. I'm going to do stuff from the Great American Songbook, a lot of blues, some country, and a few.
And maybe even Bon Jovi.
Maybe, that is not out of the question. It's funny. Those are bands that I love. And I worry I'm not going to do them justice, as well as people want. So sometimes I shy away from them. But Bon Jovi is great music.
Yeah. Well, you're always, as I said, you're always an easy listen, whether it be singing at Tuscany or calling fights. It's always been my pleasure to work with you. And I look forward to, I don't know when and if we'll do it again, but we'll certainly cross paths. I hope so too.
That would be a lot of fun. We haven't done that for a long time, and I think that would be very nice to do.
The great Al Bernstein. One final break. We'll be back to wrap things up in this corner of the podcast, a $1.68. We'll come back, wrap it up right after this.
I got 2 options. Option 1, I can accept defeat. Option 2, I can get up, I can get tougher, I can get faster, I can get stronger, and then I go get mine. I made my choice. Have you made yours?
Back in this corner of the podcast, I'm thinking like it reminds me of radio, rapidly running out of time here. On an out of sight Saturday night with Pretty Smitty from the Magic City. Jeez. Dazzling Dawn will at least like that anyway. So Lee, what do we've got in leading up to the big Crawford Canelo fight on the 13th?
Well, yeah, we got a great show planned for the 13th. That's the day of the fight. We'll have a big panel. We have a list of fighters and trainers and people that we like to get a hold of. We're still in the planning stages there. We've got
it'll at least be a 6-pack, as you call it. It'll at least be a 6-pack of of fighters, and of course we'll have Tommy Yankello, the great trainer, and Tommy has an added interest in that on September the 13th, doesn't he?
Very much so. His heavyweight, Ivan Ditchko, is going to be on the undercard of that show. So he's going to tell us a little bit about his fighter and the preparations there. And he's also going to break down the main event. Should be very interesting listening.
So the co-host and executive producer of this program, Lee Groves, has his work cut out for him. But I'm glad we had penciled Al Bernstein in probably the first week we started doing this show. Great to have Al on, and he was quite candid, even easy to listen to on this, wasn't he? He's just a really easy listen and legendary broadcaster, Al Bernstein. So long, everybody.